All right. Hello there, everybody. I hope you can hear me. This is Jeremiah. And what we're going to show you is a pretty neat little thing, pretty novel little thing of what we've got working between AutoCAD and SketchUp. And we've even recently expanded that to be able to link with other platforms. So a lot of chances for things to go wrong there, one of which we found out this morning. It's a little bit of the nature of the beast with all of this, right? But still some really neat things. We fundamentally believe that AutoCAD is the ideal platform for drafting and doing what we do, and that SketchUp and also now platforms like Revit and Rhino increasingly have a part to play, not so much for the drafting, but for the visualization, for the team coordination. And that in an ideal sense, we just need them all talking to each other. And that's exactly what we're going to show you is something that we have been working on over years, and it really works well. And we've been improving it lately to bring even more capability to it. So a couple of very, very quick housekeeping things. At the very top of your screen, you can click that view options and make it exit full screen mode. I personally like to do that so it doesn't take over my whole monitor. And do familiarize yourself here with where that Q&A button is in that upper area of your screen. If you can type in all kinds of questions, I'm sure there's going to be plenty, and we'll get those answered and routed over to Jake. And speaking of Jake, I'm going to go ahead and get this passed over to him to take us away.
Awesome. Thank you for that great introduction, Jeremiah. Um, with technology, I think we can trim that stuff out, but I feel like we should leave it. Anyways, uh, like Jer said, we are going to be covering the basics of this connection tool. We are going to be really diving into how to prepare that CAD base. Just in CAD, even starting out into SketchUp. So what we want to really make sure that we understand, all those who are watching this now, is if you don't have a basic understanding of SketchUp, how it works, definitely try to check out some of our previous webinars. Recently did one on the SketchUp basics. So we do recommend watching that, but we are going to go a little bit deeper into really setting up those base files, how that actually works, what you should consider as you start doing things directly in SketchUp or directly using CAD, and what to do scenarios when working with different types of things. So you might be working with an existing SketchUp model already that you need to tie to a CAD file that you've designed. How to actually work with those large CAD files that have all that topography and all of that line work. The tool is there to aid, but sometimes things take a little bit longer because of those processes. So how can we kind of work within those restraints? And then obviously we're going to talk about and show some of that importing and exporting of that plant material. And if we have enough time at the end, because this is going to be a very, very full webinar, we're going to just briefly show you a little sneak peek of the new plugin into Rhino. So from there, why don't we go ahead and just basically show you what the connection tool is. And what that connection tool does is it does link your construction drawing into a 3D model. But what it needs is that specific reference point on where it's looking, because this is really the nuts and bolts of how this tool operates. Is it needs to know where to place stuff. And once it knows where to place things, it will take your design and it will drop it into the proper location. So essentially taking that CAD file and assigning those 2D symbols into a 3D component symbol that relates to each one of those locations. And the really, really neat thing about this, and we can kind of go over a couple of these scenarios as we start designing and showing off this tool, is you'll notice that I've got the plan coming from the bottom up. And that's exactly how the tool is working. It's not dropping components down on top of your terrain and stuff like that. It's actually finding those lowest sections and hooking to it and growing from that point on. So being able to drop on the proper level the shrubs underneath trees, maybe underneath eaves of houses, maybe you have an inset garden area or a patio area that needs specific types of product underneath it, and the system's going to take and drop that stuff and find that lowest surface instead of dropping it from the top, so you're not getting things dropped on roofs and different things like that. So just a little graphical representation there. Now, I touched on these resources in our last SketchUp Basics webinar, but I feel like they're very, very important and still something to stress. You know, we have quite a few resources on our website specifically, and those links will be provided when this webinar is posted on our website. But even other things to keep in mind, Daniel Tall has some great books on SketchUp for site design and going through all the different ways that you can start using SketchUp to create your models and how you set those models up. Again, YouTube and stuff like that is a great resource if you like watching those little videos as well. And as my good friend Bob Wiley always said, baby steps. Baby steps is how you're going to get to where we're going to show you today. It's going to be one of the first little baby steps that we want to go over in understanding how that's set up. Once we're set up properly, we're going to be able to have that foundation that's going to be proper, that's going to sort of make that whole rest of that process smooth sailing. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right over into SketchUp. Get that guy out of the way. And I'm going to go over a couple different scenarios, and I'll list them out right now, but we'll hit them sort of in sequential order here, hopefully not too much jumping around. But you have the ability to either start from scratch in SketchUp alone, and there are tools that we're going to go over that actually help set up and scale properly your base. In which case, once we're done with that base, we'll be able to send that over to CAD as our CAD baseline work. There's also the way that we can do this by having a CAD file already put together, whether that's given to us by a civil or we create that CAD file just on our own, bringing in a picture and tracing over it. But those are basically the two scenarios. And within SketchUp, I want to show you a couple different ways how you can set up a SketchUp base file using the Add Image tool. So within SketchUp, there's the ability to add a location. And this location, essentially, we're going to pick this lovely place here, but you can essentially search anywhere that is hosted by Google Earth. It's basically Google Earth here that it's looking for those locations. Now, this is definitely all depending on how good the quality of pictures is, that I would suggest either using this tool or bringing in an image separately and then being able to scale it up. But we need to start out with some type of base. So we're taking this site here, using that add location. I can select a region and I can position my window here. I can drag this guy around, and this is the site that we want right here. So once I get sort of all encompassing what I need, I'm going to grab that picture. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to geolocate it where it is in relation to the Earth, and it's going to bring it into scale. So I don't need to worry about scaling anything here. I just need to start drafting. Now, I'm not going to go over all the drafting techniques and tools. We did cover a lot of those in our SketchUp Basics webinar, but know that this image comes in on a locked layer. And this image also has a terrain toggling So you can see that if I rotate around this thing, there is a slight terrain to this model, and that can be used in the future, and we're not going to go over how to do that per se in this one because we are hitting just the basics. But I have a working drawing that I can start tracing everything. So using my line tool, I can just start dragging this out and tracing these buildings. Now, the thing to keep in mind, especially with all of this kind of tracing the buildings, it's relative to how well you can see this image. So you can tell that this isn't a great image, but you can see that I can get the gist of it, and I've got guidelines that help get things perpendicular, and I can keep drawing around this and trace out the main buildings and stuff like that. So just using the SketchUp tools to start creating this base file, this line work of something. Holding shift as I come out, you can see that the line goes a little bit thicker, which locks it into that reference point. So I can just drag it out and hover over this so that I can get right onto that location and then click it. You're going to see that this looks like a kind of a weird double face type of thing. That's just basically telling me that I've got a surface on top of another group that's not really cutting into that surface. So that will go away if I technically pull him up. You won't tell anymore that he's on there, but it's nice practice to keep things grouped together kind of in and of itself in those entities here. So I could select everything here by triple clicking and right click and make it a group. So that way that building is its own thing. If I need to build on top of that, I can go into that and start pushing and pulling whatever I need to do to make that those modifications. But it is good to keep things kind of separate. I don't want all of my lines just completely connected together, but I do want, I'm just going to go back to having it this way. I do want to create all of my line work in a base file specifically here. So a really important thing to note as I'm going through this is the image that I showed relating to that axis or that origin point. You're going to notice that SketchUp has its origin point set to right here in the middle of this drawing right there. In SketchUp specifically, I can actually use an axis tool to go ahead and place in any different location. So I can drop him right here. I can choose my red axis, and then I can just choose my green axis, making sure that the blue axis is in the up direction. And you can see that I've just realigned my axis. So this really makes it easy as I start drawing things to keep it in a more orient in the way that I want to draw my actual lines here. So just something to keep in mind, I can change this axis around all I want, and it's not going to affect this output because SketchUp still remembers the original origin point over here in the middle of this drawing. So I can move him around. So this is a really good handy drafting technique to use. But if I need to reset that axis, go off into space here and right click on part of these axes lines and just hit reset. And the axis will return to the point where it started. Just so you're not confused about where you're going with things. If you've happened to accidentally gone like this and reset this axis to something else like this, and we start drafting things, you know, trying to push pull and do things along that axis, it might start messing things up. So being able to just right click and reset is going to get you back to where you need to be. So a good drafting technique is to use that axis tool, but know that this does not relate to essentially where Cad is going to also relate his INS base or insertion point. So we're going to kind of stop at this point, understand that we can just draft this whole thing up here. But to speed the process up along, I want to show one more example of how to kind of bring in your own base. And that is with just an actual image. Because more times than not, we might just have a PDF or an image of the site that we need to bring into SketchUp to start our base from. And we can do that by going to Google Earth and grabbing that picture. I've done that, and I've basically saved that same image, and I'm just going to drop them in here. But I really don't know how big to scale this image up. So I need to find out how to actually make this as at a real life scale here. Now, when you export out from Google Earth, it will give you a reference point of how big, you know, this site is. And I would recommend using the ruler tool to be able to just drop in 2 points in your site so that you know a dimension that you can measure after the fact. But again, garbage in, garbage out, it's just a picture. So it is going to be heavily dependent on how accurate you can be with measuring this thing out. So luckily, right here in the corner, we do have a little gauge, just a little scale of how big 400 feet is. And if you can get something like this in a drawing as a reference point, you can use your tape measure tool. And you can pick 2 points. Sometimes you might want to draw little lines that represent those 2 endpoints there so that you can sort of reference those accurately every time. But we're just going to highlight everything, and we're going to use the tape measure tool. And I'm going to pick this endpoint and this endpoint. And you're going to notice down at the bottom, it actually says enter a value to resize models. So I can just type 400 feet. And it asks me if I want to resize this model. I'm going to say yes. And it's scale it up. Now I can measure these things. Obviously this is pretty blurry, so we can't totally tell, but here's a car width. And it looks like we're right in the 8 foot, 9 foot range. So I would say that is pretty accurate from the standpoint that we've got this thing scaled up to what it should be. And I've measured 2 points before, you know, in Google Earth from here to here, and it should be right around the 360, 358 area. So it looks like I've scaled this thing up right. I can actually start designing just like we were doing before, drafting it out. Also keep in mind the use of layers and groups, like I was saying, have that ability to structure your line work in a way that as we take it over to CAD, it'll make it a little bit easier to do the cleanup. So that's this one way. I'll pause briefly, see if we have any questions, Jer.
No, no questions yet. So just a reminder to everybody, feel free to type in any questions at all while we keep going.
Great. So next way, very, very similar to being able to add a location, is essentially just building your own from scratch. This is a site, maybe I just did the design starting in SketchUp and I started building things out. Again, SketchUp is done in real units and life-size units. So the actual width of this path that I did was a 6 foot path. And we've got a couple of these buildings here, and maybe I wanted to draw another pad over here. And again, SketchUp being what it is, it does give me all these different reference points. But I can go ahead and I can even type in a dimension here. So I can say, 50 foot by 25 foot. And it will give me that dimension. If I wanted it the other way, I could say 25 foot, 50 foot. And it will change while I'm still in that tool. So place that in there, go ahead and pop him up. We'll set him up at 15 feet. And maybe I wanted a walkway to come out of the building this way. And we'll get it perpendicular there. And I'm just gonna select these guys and offset this way, drag it out and type 4 foot path. And this little line, I can go ahead and just delete him. So really, really quickly, I can start making the changes to this model, making my base plan what it is. But how do I get this over into CAD? Because that's really going to be where we want to draft. But you know, depending on your workflow, SketchUp is a really, really easy way to start seeing what it's going to be, and then from that point on, do that work into AutoCAD. So we want to make sure that we set up, you know, this view in the proper way, because I can export any type of shot in SketchUp as CAD line work. And I only want to do that if it's in plan view, unless you're doing an elevation and stuff like that, which we actually have some great webinars on. I want to make sure that I have this in the top view. So under camera, we have our standard views, and you can go ahead and hit top. And again, this is going to be really important to understand the axes, because blue is up and red is east and green is north. So understanding that, when it does kick it to the top, it is kicking it so north is up. But you can see I can still see my building lines from the 3D perspective. And that's not going to be a good thing. It's not going to be accurate from a plan view shot CAD line work that I need to generate. So what we can do is we can go into our camera, and you're going to see two options. We have parallel projection and we have perspective. If I kick it over to parallel projection, it's going to essentially make everything right on top of each other. It's going to look a little weird when I go into perspective view. It's going to make it look like things aren't the right size and whatnot, but it is basing it off of the ability to be right, looking right down on top of it. You can see that I don't have a blue axis line here. If I go out of that, you can see that that blue axis shows up, which indicates that we are in perspective. So go back into parallel projection, and you're going to have this nice line work here. So when I have this set up the way that I want it, I can zoom extents so that I get everything that's in my model. And do keep in mind that if we did have additional stuff in here, maybe I had a bunch of other site amenities or trees as placeholders or whatever it was in here, I would want to make sure that I turned off those respective layers to show just the baseline work, because that's what we're most concerned about, is having that baseline work to go off of. So we know that these are already drawn to scale, and I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to export as a 2D graphic. That 2D graphic, I have the option to just make as a picture if I want to, but I'm going to focus on this. And again, SketchUp Pro is how you're going to be able to do this. And we're going to go ahead and got him. We'll go ahead and drop him on the desktop. And we'll just go ahead and say he's a line work, and export him. So now, if we go, I'm going to open up that file on my desktop, and it's going to prompt you with a couple things, because again, this wasn't generated in AutoCAD originally, so it's going to prompt you as such. And being able to clean this up afterwards, our nuke tool would do this. Right blocking it into a new file would do it. Make it kind of recognize as CAD, so you don't get prompted with that every time. But there's our line work, and you can see that it is just single lines that we got going on here. Now, here's the trade-off: is when you do things in SketchUp, it is going to bring it in by every line segment. So those arcs are busted up and stuff like that. So it is a little bit of a messy way of getting some line work in here. However, we do offer our super join tool. So if we go ahead and type superjoin and click on one of these entities, you can see that it will join everything that it can together, which makes that cleanup that much easier to do stuff, moving things around. Now I know I can place things in these closed polylines and join those lines together, whatever I need to do. So it makes it really, really easy to do that kind of cleanup. So now we actually have line work that we can start placing our plants in. And going to one of the crucial points, we understand that we're looking for the right insertion point, but now we need to set up a project. And you should be familiar with that, just starting a normal CAD plan and starting a project specific for your design. But make sure that that specific project is set to your drawing. So we can set one that's already existing, we can create a new one. However, I've already got this guy in here, and I've magically placed some plants to save us a little bit of time here. But we just go ahead and do our plan. So this is essentially the plan for what I did. Now, obviously, I'm missing that additional line work, so there's that. But we're now at a point where we know what project we have set. And we'll open this up to confirm it. So I've got this guy, my SketchUp created base. So say okay. And I'm just going to jump right back over into SketchUp because I want to see that I've got my same project assigned here. So we do have this very similar or exact setup for the LandFX tool. So let's go grab the project that it is. And you're going to see that he's already assigned to this guy. So that's good. And now we'll show you why it's important that those insertion points line up. Even though I sent over to CAD that exact line work, you would think that it's the same, but like I said, CAD and SketchUp do treat these things differently. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to use our tool here, our 3D connection tool. And under planting, under presentation, we have the SketchUp option. Now these are all of our different options here, and we don't need to send the layers because these layers were literally generated out of SketchUp. So we don't need to send them back. So we're just going to export our design. And you're going to get a prompt that you can run that into your base file. So we're going to jump right over back into SketchUp, and we're going to import those plants. Now I've already pre-assigned the plants from when I set up those objects in my LandFX project, but you can click on any of these guys and be prompted with the different options that we have here. You can also assign your own. We're not going to go into that. We have a few other intermediate and advanced webinars that show how to do that. But I'm good with the way that I've got it. I'm just going to go ahead and import it. Well, look at that. That does not look like it should be there. And again, it's because it's referencing the point right up here as the insertion point of 0, 0. So this is how we can actually get these things to line up. We're going to go ahead and we're going to figure out where this insertion point, making sure that it's obviously in the original spot, because no matter where that insertion point is, I can even align that axis to this guy here. And let's say my insertion point looked here, it's still not going to recognize that. We need to make sure that that insertion point is at the bottom corner of this building here. So we'll go ahead and we'll go back over. And right here, this is where we need to drop that insertion point. And the way we can do this is by using a new UCS. And again, a UCS in AutoCAD is going to respect still the same world position. So no matter which way you rotate this, but it's going to give it a new point of insertion here. So we're going to click this corner, and I still want it to be positioned up like this. So I'm actually going to right click so that it's set at 0. And we're going to just call it SketchUp. That way it's really easy to know that this UCS is for our SketchUp export. So I set that up, and you can see that he's lined up now. So I'm going to just run that tool one more time, exporting the design. Keep in mind that any changes that you do make from a UCS standpoint or moving things around, you do need to export fresh so that SketchUp or just that relation to wherever you're sending it is sent properly. So now that we're here, I'm going to get back over to perspective so that's a little bit easier to see. We're here. I'm just going to go ahead and run the tool again. Say yes to delete those existing ones. And let's see, go ahead and import. And poof, look at that. It dropped them right where they should because it's looking at that exact UCS. So now that we have those plants in there, we know that everything is kind of lined up. We can really start building out the rest of the model. We can start building out, making tweaks to things as we start viewing things this way, and just start fine-tuning it a little bit. Now, one thing I did not mention yet, and it's a very important part, is actually the units that we've got set here. So we've talked about the fact that we have to have the right insertion point and the right project set up, and we have to have the right units. So I, of course, made sure that as I draft in SketchUp that I'm using the proper units there, but you can also go to Model Info and go to your units to make sure that this is set properly. So if you are working in CAD as decimal feet, this should say decimal feet, and then they will line up. You cannot, SketchUp does not know how to convert AutoCAD, and it just looks at the units as if it were drawn in that. So just understand those aspects of it is really the final point. So before I move on, is there any questions, Jer?
Yeah, actually, we just had a really good question from Lee, and he was just wondering if you could maybe really quickly show how to walk down that path at eye level.
Sure. Okay, so in camera, and again, this goes to really, and this is in the Mac side, so it looks a little different, but customizing your toolbar, I can set up all kinds of different ones. The big getting started toolbar, I've got, the option to actually pick any one of these and drag them up into my toolbar if I'm going to use them, or just know the commands to do so. But there is a tool under camera called position camera, and it turns into a little guy. Oops, cancel that of him. Turns into a little guy, and you can actually place him kind of wherever you want to in the drawing. So we'll go ahead and drop him right here, and you're given an eye height level here. Now this is relative to where it is at the origin point. So if you've got a model that's built up way past 0, it's going to look like you have an eye height of 100 feet or something. So it is kind of relative. So just play around with that number, and typing whatever you want in there will higher or raise or lower that up. And I turn into an eye automatically, and I can do this. Now I can right click and walk, and I get these little feet, and it lets me start to drag around, and you can see that little crosshair there. Wherever I click and let go, that's where it's going to base my walking point off of. So I could just click up this way and start dragging, and it's going to go that way. Or I can click down here, and it'll kind of catch me around wherever I need to go. So yeah, you can really pretty easily start doing stuff. Ooh, look at that bush. And if I hold control, let's see. Oh, there it is. Hold shift, sorry. shift and click and drag up or down, I raise or lower that way. So I could really easily get lost, obviously, but I can go ahead and I can look around from this perspective, or I can walk from this perspective. And then as I hold those different commands down, I can lower myself. I can start walking around and go that way. So yeah, that's how you do that. Any other ones?
I just wanted to mention that that in conjunction with turning the shadows on is just really why we just really love SketchUp for exactly what you're showing. There's just no other tool that has the simple approachability of a 3D tool set. So it just how quickly you're showing some really amazing capability for evaluating your design.
Yep. And to go off of that, there is definitely ways to make little movie animations and stuff like that. So just progressing through and making different scenes like this will actually let you kind of do that whole type of thing, and I can fine tune the delay between each scene and stuff like that, and I can record that, save it as a movie. Definitely all really cool ways to do that. And if you start getting into that, I would recommend getting the navigation mouse that is used in SketchUp. It's the 3D orbiting. It looks like a little command center joystick, and it's super, super cool. It makes it really, really fluid as you're walking through and going through it. So, yeah, that's definitely not in this one. So, questions?
No, I think you can keep on going.
All right, cool. So that's essentially on a very basic level how we can do things. Now, what happens when we get a file like this? And it's got all kinds of terrain and all kinds of line work, and it's just it's not any more complicated than what we're normally used to seeing. But from a SketchUp standpoint, we're going to start doing the tools here, and I'm not going to send too many of these because it will start to chug on trying to think and send those, because what this plugin will do is it'll allow you to send these layers, and I'm going to send these plot layers here, and it's going to look at the positions, and it's going to send them over to SketchUp, and it's going to turn them off so that I can see that I've sent that off, and I can keep going and whatever lines I want to send over there. Keep in mind, it's only sending lines. It's not sending blocks. It's not sending things in groups. So it is strictly line work. However, it will send anything and everything. Now, like I said, I've sent this topography before as a test, and it does take several minutes to look at every one of those positions, because they're not just a solid line. They're several different lines. So we're talking about thousands of little lines that it's got to orient and position. So how could we make that quicker? How can we still get it tied into a SketchUp model, get it oriented properly, but still have all of this kind of detail? And the way that we can do that is through SketchUp Pro, and we can actually import that CAD file. So the complete CAD file we can go ahead and grab. So I'm going to grab this guy here, and we're going to import him in. And it failed because all that stuff is in a base, or sorry, in an XREF. So let's go ahead and try to grab that again. And we'll go to our desktop here. And let's grab that base file. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. I'm sorry. I should have grabbed that. Let's erase that. Let's try one more time. I get one mess up if Jared gets one mess up. Oh, shoot. I think I might have deleted him. So that's easy enough to fix. Let's go ahead and grab that guy. See where he is. I don't know where I put him. Just for fun, we are going to save him onto the desktop to make this quick.
And actually, while Jake is fixing that, I'll take care of a common question here. Multiple people have asked, "Oh wow, what are these neat little buttons you're using in SketchUp?" And yes, the Land Effects plugin for SketchUp you can grab in a number of ways. You can just Google Land Effects SketchUp. You'll find it. Download for it on our website. It's also in the extension warehouse available through SketchUp. But certainly I would at least start with Googling Land Effects and SketchUp, and you actually find a number of our videos and webinars on the subject, and there's even a couple of random little forum posts here and there on other websites that happen to mention it. So definitely pretty easy to find and get that installed.
Cool. All right, so I realized that as I was cleaning up my files so that I wouldn't get confused, I removed that file because apparently I got confused. So here it is. It's thinking about it. Definitely bringing in a lot of stuff here. But from the respect that I've already brought in everything now, and it's kind of all inclusive basically of my line work, I can use that as a reference now to then start cleaning up my stuff. And I can go ahead and I can explode this if I want to. I'm not going to because it's got a lot of lines in here and it'll take a little bit of time. But what I'm most concerned about here is how do I line this base up now with my CAD file? Because if I go back over to CAD and I go ahead and place, let's just place a tree real quick. We'll grab this guy. We'll come over here and we'll go ahead and just drag a line of these guys right here. So that's what I want to bring over into SketchUp, and it really makes a difference to be able to just place a couple things and quickly send that design over into here to make sure that everything is working. So you can see this is the one tree. We'll go ahead and import him and see where he goes. Oh, he went perfect. I think I already set up my UCS on that one. So it is where it should be. Let me get over to restore UCS. There we go. Now let me try real quick. So this is how it would be if I had that initial design. I'll export that out and come back over to SketchUp and we'll bring that over. And you can see that it dropped my trees. Oh, there they are, right over there. So I know right off the bat that it wasn't set up properly from a UCS standpoint. And you can do a bunch of different investigation tricks and measure from here to the insertion point and see where that lines up with the CAD file. But essentially, it is that far off from that position. So we just created a new UCS and set it at that bottom corner, right where the SketchUp file is. We named it SketchUp, and we exported from that using that tool. Export our design. Go back over to SketchUp, run that import tool, and it will put them in exactly where they should go from there. So that's all fine and dandy. But what if I made changes here and I actually started, because this is what I do all the time, is I start getting involved in the SketchUp file way too much, and then I forget all the changes that I made, and how do I reflect those changes? So this is great. Being able to send your design back over to Cad or whatever platform. So we'll go back over to Cad and we'll use that same tool, but this time instead of exporting our design, we're going to import our design. And you can see that it automatically puts those guys right where they were located at. So really, really nice to be able to make changes in one location and bring them right over into this right here. So from there, I'm going to pause for one more set of questions until I move on.
No, I think we're good.
All right. So the next one is fairly similar to importing that CAD line work, but this is basically, we've done a CAD design. We were given a base file and all that stuff, but then another office, maybe you created this separately as a completely different thing, but you don't have, or you built a SketchUp model for that CAD design, but they don't line up. So it's really the same kind of process, but just understanding this is one more scenario that might come up is that you're given a SketchUp file that has your whole design done and model done. So you don't need to send your layers, you don't need to do that, but you've done the actual planting plan for it. So how do I line that up? Again, understanding where that insertion point is going to be the best way. But what you can also do is essentially, and let's just make sure I'm in, I don't have anything there, cool. I can actually place on a layer. So I'm going to create a layer. I called it just my reference point, and I'm just going to create just a spot on this plan somewhere that I know exists in that other one. So maybe it's this right here. We're just going to go ahead and just trace this real quick as kind of that reference point. And I'm going to send that layer over to SketchUp. I want to see where it lands in relation to the model. So cancel out of there, come over here, and we're going to send that reference point layer. Okay, so there it is. It actually looks like it is right where it should be. And you can see that from a terrain standpoint, this is set at 0, 0 here, so we're right on top of it. You could essentially move the whole plan up if you needed to, but let's go ahead and let's drop this design in and see what it does. Let's go ahead and export our design. Let's go back over to SketchUp and let's go ahead and import. Here's our deal. And looks like everything landed where it should, and look at that, it landed right on top of the topography. So it didn't matter that my line work was up above here. Definitely still is important to note that well, I wonder why those went there. You have a thought on those, Jer?
That's definitely an interesting one.
I wonder if I have hidden geometry somewhere. I don't know. Interesting. Okay, that's a new one to me. However, you can see that everywhere else, even if I wanted to maybe place some stuff in here, I'm curious to see, I got a few surfaces, so that probably won't be the best example there. But I could open up this guy real quick. and I've got a base in here. So we're going to put back his top, and just for fun, let's see if this works here. We'll drop a couple of these guys in here because I have a house garden in this house right here. We'll send him over. And we will send that in. Okay. So should we just X-ray it, see if they're in there? Oh, look at that. Look at there. There they are. So really, really cool that, you know, Land Effects treats that way, still giving you that ability to do your designs, have it go where it needs to go. It's really, really cool. So anyways, that's kind of a little snapshot there. And we're going to go over one more way here. And this is essentially starting in CAD. So I know we went a little bit backwards from a drafting standpoint, and I would say typically we would start in CAD, but this is really the fastest way anyways. So so I wanted to make sure that we kind of understood all the possibilities in the SketchUp side of things here. So we've got our layers and stuff, our line work, all of our stuff done in CAD. We've started in AutoCAD. We did our design. Maybe we got the XREF. You know, we were given this XREF, whatever, but we've done everything. So like we've been kind of going over, this is just hammering to the fact that I know what my units are set to. So understanding that guy, I know that I've set a UCS already as SketchUp, and that UCS is based on this insertion point of that building. And I've done my planting plan. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn off my stuff here just so we can kind of look at this line work and just use this a little bit more thorough so you can see how well all this stuff goes through. So to be able to know exactly what kind of layers you're sending over, it's just going to start knocking things off the list. So you can start getting everything and anything over into SketchUp that you want. This again is a really good way, not just to bring over the whole file like we talked about before, but being specific to what you want to bring into that CAD file, or sorry, to that SketchUp file. That way you're not bogged down with, unusable line work and stuff like that. So once we get all that done, you can right click and you're kind of ready to go. It'll pop back up and we're going to go over into SketchUp. And here we'll go ahead and make sure that we're obviously set to the right project there. And I want to make sure that that's actually the project that we've set. Okay, so that is incorrect, which is a good thing I checked. So let's pick the right one here. And let's go ahead and bring some of those layers in. And I'm just going to show you one layer set here so that we can kind of get going. But you're going to see that it starts putting in those layers exactly where they were set. And as much as it can, it's going to start filling in the faces. So what happens when we fill in those faces and there's still broken lines? There's going to be a lot of drawing cleanup that needs to be done. I guess I'll just bring in a couple more here. While I'm bringing these in, are there any questions, Chair?
I guess I've been able to handle them. I'm just trying to think of which would be good to recap, but I'll let you go ahead and kind of wrap up and recap here. I think I got these last questions that I can take care of.
Okay, cool. Well, so once we get all of our line work in here, you're going to see that sometimes they close off, sometimes they don't. Um, in instances like this is a great example, understanding that as you're viewing your edge styles, profiles is going to be your best friend to show you that there is something wrong with the way that it cut in the face or it didn't cut in the face. So being able to draw a line over a line will uh, usually, and it looks like this is the problem right here, he was not intersected. So drawing him back in, you can see that he turns out to be thin now and he cuts in the way that he should. So understanding that profiles are a great indicator of that. A really good tool, we didn't talk about plugins, we're going to cover those in later ones, I'm sure, but to be able to find your edge gaps is a really good one. The Edge Tools Squared is a really good plugin to find all those different edge gaps and what to do with them. So to handle that kind of line work cleanup, but more importantly, to be able to see that once I get this all in there, to have everything the way that we want it, we can then start using those SketchUp tools to start building up that model. And once we get all of those edges done and we've modeled things out the way that we want them, and we've painted things, whatever we want to do here, we can now have a working drawing that essentially, group together so that it's like your base file. Nothing's going to touch what you modify on it and stuff like that, but group all that stuff together to be able to then send over your design. So we can go ahead and turn on that stuff one more time. And we'll go ahead and send our design over. And while I'm doing this, might as well just go ahead and open up our site stuff. Actually, right here. And you can tell that I've got a few different things in here that I wanted to place site-wise, maybe throw in another little trash can there. And we'll send that over. And then let's go ahead and bring him over to SketchUp. Here's our nice list, seeing what we've got going on. Import that in. And again, having that ability for the stuff to drop down to what it should, being able to turn on your shadows, see how things are going to lay. Definitely really, really cool way to actually project that kind of stuff. If something needs to be moved after the fact, turn off the shadows because it's a little faster that way. Maybe that trash can needs to be moved right there, and this bench gets to be moved over slightly, and that one actually doesn't need that based on our stuff. We can go ahead and export that back out and go into Cad, import that design, see the changes exactly how it was made, and keep going on from there. Any last questions? I know we're a minute over.
No, and I think that that covered it. Did you have any last things you wanted to show?
I want to show this in Rhino, the ability to, again, talking about that 3D aspect, how you guys show your stuff. Rhino is definitely one of those programs that is a little bit more robust and what its 3D capabilities are. So, don't, it's not for the faint of heart, I would say. But to be able to, I'm going to go into here because it should go a little bit faster, and actually want to go ahead and freeze just so we can end on a decent, here. I can freeze my shrubs or specific plants and export that out, and it'll only bring those ones in there, which is what I want to do just for the ease of this. We'll go ahead and let this import up here. And, as we said in beta testing, the content is going to be, slowly built in there just like it is for SketchUp, but being able to import here once it actually loads up.
And certainly for those who are interested in Rhino, to stay tuned for our full-length webinar on Rhino.
Yep. But you can see it populating those trees right where we had them over in Cad here. And once it gets done, we'll go ahead and turn on those shaded with textures and see what our final output is. So there it is. So again, really cool to be able to see that kind of stuff in real time, make those changes, send them over, tie between whatever plugin that you're using there, obviously what is supported, but see those changes that quick. So with that, definitely thank you guys for attending, and let us know if you have any other questions. We can help you out.